Forward trunk leaning is a mechanical component that has been affecting a lot of athletes that I've seen, whether it's been online that I've trained, or just even in my own career in general. And this specific problem causes a lot of issues like not enough stacking of the trunk, right? So as you're going down the mound on the stride phase, the trunk tends to lean out forward. With the limitation of stacking, you're not going to be able to transfer as much energy as possible out towards the plate. And I like to think about this scenario as in, like, imagine if you guys had a bucket of water, and inside that bucket, obviously the water is energy, and then the bucket is your trunk or the pelvis in all the stacking, right? And so since the water is energy, if your trunk goes out leaning forward, you're going to start to dump out water, which is going to be potential energy diminishing throughout the whole entire process that otherwise you could have kept, so you can transfer that over into more velocity once the front foot lands, and then you're able to unload what the trunk is bringing. So it is very crucial for us as athletes that, or as pitchers, that we're able to keep as much energy as possible as we're going down the stride. Now, keep in mind, a forward trunk at front foot landing can also cause a lot of command issues. Now, if your arm isn't trying to actively speed up, you're more than likely going to bounce the ball in front of the plate, or your arm can also stay out far, lagging behind. And then that's also going to cause for you to throw fastballs up and away, respectfully to the hitter that you're throwing to, whether you're lefty or righty. So within this video, we're going to cover out the lessons and the strategies that I've used with a lot of my athletes to fix these mechanical imbalances or these mechanical points. And I'm going to be naming out the top 3 reasons why these things are happening. Now, before we actually go into this, my name is Anthony Rodriguez, coach and founder of Versus Athletics. We've trained over 200 plus athletes, help increase their pitch and velocity and help move pain-free. So with all of the strategies that I'm going to be mentioning here, these strategies simply come from the lessons, all of the certifications, all of the trial and errors, training all of these athletes, all the lessons that I've accumulated over the years, simply semi-summarized into one video. So again, there is no guarantee that if you guys take everything that I'm telling you guys in here and apply it for yourself, that it's gonna work out. It's only so much that you can get from a YouTube video, especially when you're implementing things that aren't specifically for your body. Every single thing that we've gathered comes from assessments from all the different athletes that we've assessed. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into these 3 reasons. So the first, all 3 reasons could actually come up into one simple big reason, but I just decided to break them up because they can semi-be different topics, right, that we can definitely dive in on. However, reason number 1 and 2, I am going to combine them both because they're pretty similar, just a little different analogy. So reason number 1 is a pelvic drop, and reason number 2 is an asymmetrical imbalance. So let's start off with reason number 1 is a pelvic drop. What that happens is when we look at the postural alignment of the pitcher's body, the front hip, right, has a drop. So if your pelvis is supposed to be in this linear position instead of being stacked, right, we have a pelvis that is leaning out forward. Now, the reason why this affects the pitcher is because when they're on the mound and they're pitching, that front pelvic drop is going to naturally grab the trunk and have that trunk lean out forward instead of being able to stay back. And this is very important because a lot of athletes who don't realize that they have this issue, they try to go and fix it with constant drills after drills after drills after drills. And the problem is that no drill that you would have done was ever going to fix this issue, because it's never a drill issue, it's never a patterning issue. It was an anatomical restriction that you were having and you needed to address within the gym. Now, that ties it up into the asymmetrical balance, right? The asymmetrical balance is when one side of the body is overly more dominant than the other side of the body. Now, we are human, so we are going to be naturally asymmetrical and balanced, right? And the correct word is asymmetrical imbalance here. We're going to be naturally asymmetrically imbalanced because that is just our nature. That's how we can produce torque, force, etc. However, when we are too far on an extreme, that extreme can cause issues on the other side of the body. So in this scenario, let's say you have a right-handed pitcher, right? And of course, as they're pitching, they're moving forward towards the left side. Let's say they have an asymmetrical imbalance of on mostly more dominant on the left side. Yes, that does happen regardless of you being lefty or righty. Now, that overbalance is going to pull them forward a lot more aggressively than allowing them to stay back, right? So we're thinking about the body in a state of tug of war. right? One side is overly more aggressive or is overly more strong than the other side. So that side is always going to lead the way, which is going to be leaning forward. However, yes, even though we are going to be asymmetrical imbalance to a certain point, we need to have that fine tug of war where one side can still pull back enough, right, until it decides it's time to let the front side carry and unload the energy forward. So in terms of us fixing these issues, of course, all of our athletes, again, we do run them through an anatomical movement assessment to understand and find out where these muscle imbalances come from. And we have a very simple process of just targeting that. Once we understand what the view is of which muscles are overactive, which muscles are underactive, we are going to mobilize those overactive muscles. Now, those overactive muscles can come in muscles like the lats, could come into adductors, could come into the glutes, could come into the obliques, right? We're just trying to find out which ones are the ones that are actively playing a role into this. Now, from finding which ones are actively playing a role into it, there's going to be another set of muscles that aren't playing much of a role into it, which means they're more than likely underactive. So we want to activate those muscles, and then we want to inhibit the muscles that are overactive, right? That way we can create semi much of a balance, right? This is when it comes to the asymmetrical stuff. And for the hip drop, right, we can still recreate, again, the same balance by inhibiting one the side that's mainly more active or elevated, and then strengthening the correct muscles on the other side to be able to reset the pelvis in the correct position that it needs to be. Now, within the gym, I love using a mixture of unilateral and bilateral lifting, especially when we can combine them in supersets within the gym. So let's say you are doing a back squat, obviously that's a bilateral lift, assuming that the normal person has the same amount of weight on both sides. And then after that, we can pair that up with either unilateral lift or a contralateral lift. So something that I would do is maybe like a single leg cable rotation or Y stance cable rotation. Even though the Y stance cable rotation is bilateral, it is to an extent contralateral as well. So we can definitely go a lot more deeper into it. It falls into the aspect that I preach a lot about, training their muscle synergies, the muscles that connect each other throughout the whole entire body, obviously, which is how we move. And if you want to know and learn more about that, I do have a video for that down below in the description if you want to go check it out. But having a mixture of unilateral, bilateral, contralateral, if you will, lifts in there to correct those movement imbalances for sure, especially when it comes to training the obliques, the trunk, the glutes. All those muscles in there are going to be very important. Now, reason number 3 would be our athletes' motor preferences. So going back into like the asymmetrical imbalance, some athletes would have a more of a dominant side. Now, that dominant side may lead more into their preferences, and they may be too much into their preferences, which is also not a great thing, right? So we want to be able to find out a sweet spot in which these athletes feel the best on and can perform the best on. And the main thing that we're going to be using that is their feedback, how they're performing, what the gun is saying, all these things. Are they healthy, etc.? And can they do it consistently? That's going to be mainly the most important thing. So that's going to be reason number 3. Is it's really going to come down to what is this athlete's preferences? Is he too far out in these preferences, or is he not, etc.? We want to use that information to at least cue the athlete, give him the drills to find his way around out of not tilting the trunk out so far out. There are some athletes that will do it, don't get me wrong. It will be excellent for them. But again, you want to have that sweet spot. Now, in terms of drills, right, here's where the good ones are going to come in. Again, assuming that you've already targeted these imbalances, asymmetrical imbalances of one side of the body being more overactive than the other. Now, we want to go ahead and get into the drills, right? If you've never had none of these issues, then drills is probably going to be the one that you start off with, of course. But when it comes to drills for this, you want to keep it rather simple. It shouldn't be a drill that's out of the ordinary, to be very honest. What's going to be most important in these drills is the way that you're cueing them and maybe the constraints that you have in place to make them have such effect. So for example, I would love like regular drills like rockers rotor lift, hovers, or regular step backs. Now, the rockers rotor lift, obviously within that drill, you're going to be in a wider stance, right? And we're almost like teaching the body like, hey, this is kind of like where you have to be. This is how stacked you have to be as you're rocking back and forth. And then you go up and then down into the delivery, kind of like just trying to trace back those movements. On the hover, you're also teaching the body again, or being in a more constrained place of like where you can ride down and cue yourself to like, okay, keep the chin behind the belt buckle, or even just a regular step back, doing this, having similar cues. Now, you can use the body to manipulate what the trunk is doing. For example, like if you're going to do either the rockers, the hovers, or the step backs, you can preset the trunk to be flex forward, right? And as you're going through the motion, the trunk is going to be flex forward. But as you get down and out the mount, you're going to then cue yourself to get the trunk to go back. So it's almost like you're kind of having this swing effect of the trunk is starting down, and then as you get down and out the mount, the trunk is going to then lean relatively back or to a neutral point. Now, this is going to also help the function of the pelvic opening, closing, stacking, dumping, you name it. So that's also a very unique way that you can cue your drills and get a different effect just from a regular drill that you do. Now, if you want to go a little bit more overboard with those drills, I always like the concept of feeding the flaw, right? So these athletes may naturally be already getting into these positions. They might not even be aware of themselves doing this much, right? So what we want to do is that we want to get them aware that they're moving in these positions. So you guys, with the drills that I've mentioned, you guys can go ahead and grab a band and tie that band, pulling them forward, right, where it's now overly or aggressively tilting the trunk forward. Now, this is going to give them more awareness, because now they're going to be like, holy crap, like I feel this now. I don't like it, right? It is too much. So what they're going to try to do is actually do the opposite and stay back of instead of dumping all the way out forward. So that's a way that you can feed the flaw, and then over time you can do it vice versa. Tie it from the backside, and then just kind of like lean on more back, more of a emphasized way of like, yeah, well, this is where you got to stay back. Other things that I like is you can throw uphill with the drills. Obviously, if you're throwing uphill, there ain't no way that you can. There is a way. There's always a way, but you're more than likely not going to be falling forward as aggressively as you would on a regular down slope. So in this instance, you're forcing the body based on the environment to actually tilt the opposite way and have the trunk more lean out back as you're going uphill. So again, those are kind of like the main lessons and the reasons that I've seen why a lot of athletes can tend to dump their trunk out forward. Now, there's definitely a lot more reasons why these may be happening. Maybe a glove issue, maybe a leg issue, maybe just a mound issue. Who knows? It's a plethora of ways of why something may be happening. Now, obviously, everything that I just shared with you has come just from my lessons of training over 200 plus athletes, my own career, things that I've seen, my studying, my certifications, you name it. To which one would this apply to you? Of course, those things will take an assessment. And that is by far the most important thing that you can just do in your career, aside from just watching a YouTube video and understanding these concepts and gaining a little bit more knowledge. Knowledge is great, but if you're not applying it towards the right person at the right time with the right cues, at the right scenario, it's not going to be usable, right? So we start out all of our athletes with an assessment, anatomical movement assessment, then we proceed towards a motor preference assessment so that we can understand the limitations and how their body prefers to think and move, etc. That way, every single thing that we're giving all of our athletes is strictly or as transferable as possible for who they are. And that's exactly what we do, and that's how we help our pitchers overcome a lot of these mechanical flaws and increase their velocity. So of course, if this video sounds like a lot, maybe you're missing a little bit more information. Maybe you are actually struggling with dumping your trunk forward and it's eating up maybe 3 to 5 miles an hour off your fastball, and you want to get down to the bottom of this. You're probably tired of trying a bunch of different videos that you've seen online and nothing seems to be working. I promise you guys, like, what you're missing, just an understanding of where you guys are currently at and what it is that you're missing so you can continue to roll forward. Now, if again, it is something that you need and you're looking for a direct approach with someone like myself to help you get over these mechanical flaws and increase your velocity so you can become that guy for your team, down below in the description, feel free to book a call with us where we can discuss further of where you guys are currently at and see if we can actually help. If we can help, then we'll be more than glad to speak about the strategies and how exactly we'll be helping you specifically. So without further ado, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.